Speaking of tools, if a company is going to get the most from DevOps, do they actually need a big software tool? Do you go out and buy a software tool, or is it a question of an internal process? Can you get the most with an internal process? Lori, your sense, you need a tool or not for DevOps? I want to get you in trouble here.
Well, I mean, part of DevOps is the automation is about optimizing the process to make it go faster. Right?
Right.
So if you can do that without a tool, good luck, but sure, go ahead. It's not so much about the tool as it is about optimizing the processes and figuring out what's working, what's not, and how to get that moving faster. You don't necessarily need a new or better tool. Now, will that make that process faster or better? Yes, absolutely. I think that tools are something that we're going to use in order to make that happen. And so they're going to be an important part of this whole cultural change and the shift in how we work. But are they strictly necessary? No, I don't think so.
No, I would add to that the perspective of tools has been a significantly misunderstood area of DevOps, and it's because of the rise in the open source community tooling that has grown up around the modern cloud computing era. So things were missing in order to add automation and self-service, so provisioning, auto scale, things like that. And so the vacuum was filled by open source communities, and they became the clear leaders into this movement. But and for a startup who's building and innovating in this area, it's very easy for people to say, oh, look, this startup is doing this process and they're being really successful. But let's remember that they're starting greenfield, they're building something completely new, they're innovating, and they're looking for the lowest cost path to getting there. Now you take an enterprise who's already invested in tools like CA and IBM and BMC and HP, and they have significant arsenals of these tools. These tools are fine for implementing and gaining agility through a DevOps change if you want to apply them to that function. And these companies are helping their their customers to apply their tool sets in this way, and that change is coming. But many of these tools already exist in the organization. It's just how they're organized. And I think Andy would agree with that. Andy's done a great job of helping CA take what they already own and bundle it so that it supports this particular goal with a consolidated and integrated tool set. So there's some work that could be done there, but do you need to go out and buy or download all these different tools and be retrained on things like Vagrant and Chef and Jenkins and Git? Not if you have their tool set and you have an enterprise license to it already. It's a matter of learning how to use it. And the danger that befalls enterprises today is as the groundswell, the grassroots movement moves forward with DevOps, you see individuals going out there and introducing without permission of executives and without a definite decision to go in a particular direction. Vagrant, Chef, Jenkins, and you end up with all these different new tool silos, and by the way, software is code, right? Everything's becoming software, so who's managing the new 35,000 lines of code that actually runs the other 200,000 lines of code now?
It's like shadow DevOps?
Well,
Is that what it is?
I mean, what you're describing also is, you're right. If they don't change their silo of thinking, they end up with a new silo. But I think a lot of times they go and do that because the old tools were created with an old way of thinking, right? And I think it's not the tool, it's how people want to work. And this is why I think the open source tools caught on, because it wasn't that the tools were free. I think there's plenty of companies that will spend money on that. Sure, the 5-person startup doesn't care, but the cost of a tool to a bank, to an insurance company, to any of these folks we work with a lot, they don't care, right? It's truly insignificant, even if it's a multi-million-dollar spend. The problem is it's how people want to work, and when they see these new tools, when they see something like a Vagrant, right? And they get the idea that as a developer, wow, I now have a manifest-driven way to say, boom, I've got my full production environment, or production style environment on 5 boxes. Bang, it's right there. The VMs come up. And I go to hand it off to my ops team. The ops team runs, they do a Git pull. They run Vagrant up, right? So from source, it loads Vagrant up, it either works or it doesn't, and it goes through all the steps. They see everything working right there. Like, the cloud comes to life. I mean, I've seen many people say, "Wow, I actually get the cloud now after I've used Vagrant." Do they go and use Vagrant in production? Maybe not. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. Maybe they probably don't use Vagrant in production. But that style of working, it becomes addictive to say, "Hey, this is a source-driven, kind of small batch, fast feedback." Everything sort of kind of service-oriented way of writing, and developing and managing my services, and allows us to all look in repositories and collaborate around that code. That's what people, I think, really wanted. That's what they really, that's what the open source tools provided them, because it was a lot of them were written by practitioners saying, "Geez, there's got to be a better way to do this," and I think they really got out ahead of the game. And that idea of small elemental tools doesn't really play well with the large vendor's business model. Sorry, Andy. It's just, it's kind of things where, you want to go in and sell millions of dollars of software, and to do that, you've got to go wide and you've got to go deep. And, I think there's a strong argument there to be made for that. But, that doesn't sort of, lend itself as well to that, tool chain style, smaller way of working. So I think there's a gap there between, what transpired in the open source community and the traditional vendors catching up.
And is a tool needed for DevOps?
No, it's how you're working.
David, I'm sorry.
It's how you're working. Doesn't it me? Oh, sorry.
And Andy, what's your sense of whether or not a tool would be needed to leverage DevOps?
Look, I think it depends significantly on the size of the organization, and I think what Damon's saying is right to a large degree. That the historical legacy tools were not built for this mode of working. A lot of them were built around the classic ITIL processes, right, and being able to shut down certain capabilities, change approval boards and these sorts of things. Some of those old tools are not necessarily going to work as well. I think you do need some tooling, though, especially in a larger enterprise. Just the sheer scale and complexity, especially around the automation spaces, as Laurie was saying before. I'd certainly say that there are even legacy tools, and I don't like that word, but I know it's common, traditional tools, shall we say, that work really well in this environment. I know customers of mine using things like IT process automation tool sets, and these have been around for a decade or more. To be able to automate the process of moving information, moving data, moving code, be able to automate things like privileged user management, password management, being able to automate the ability to do testing in virtual environments rather than sort of testing in live environments. There's a lot of this stuff which it's already a solved problem. And with deference to some of the open source community who are doing some great work and creating really useful tool sets, they're also in some pockets doing so out of ignorance of the solved problem. They're re-solving the problem in maybe a new way, but often an inferior way, where certainly there's open source tool sets which are really good for this new mode of delivering better quality applications. But with organizations like JP said that have already got an ELA for a process automation tool, they've got people who are already trained in it. It's already connected to multiple parts of the organization. Why wouldn't you start there and start to, and again, instead of creating a new silo of a new automation tool and another new automation tool, why wouldn't you use what you've already got? Doesn't say you're not going to get new stuff as well. Doesn't mean you're not going to, that you have to get everything new. But find what you've already got and make incremental benefit. And I think that's where some of the existing implementations of tool sets are going to really help.